Welcome to this video series on how to read an EKG. The EKG stands for electrocardiogram. The K is because it's German. Other people call it an ECG. And we're going to step through a process that will help you decipher these waveforms here. Now, this is a lifelong journey to learn how to read these things well. And so we're not going to perfect it now. We're going to go over the basics, but you can learn a lot just today. But over the course of your career, you're going to learn a lot more. Now, I've created a couple of worksheets, cheat sheets here, so that you can kind of refer to them. And so we're going to talk about how do you look at the rate, how do you look at the rhythm, the axis, as well as the intervals, and again, localizing infarcts and ischemia and hypertrophy. Now, I know you've probably talked about some of these in your physiology course, but now we're going to take a perspective from the EKG and looking at these one more time. So here we are back at our EKG, and we can see the waveforms that are on here. And there's the waveforms, and then there's also these letters here, these little labels. And so if we look at this, these are called the leads. And you can see we got 1, 2, 3 here. And each one of these boxes represents a perspective of looking at the heart. It's called a lead, and we have 12 of them, and that's how we get a 12-lead EKG. Now at the bottom we have another set of waveforms, and you can see they are again labeled V1, 2, and V5, but they go the entire length of the piece of paper. And the reason they do that is so that we can look at the rhythm, and so we call this thing the rhythm strips. Now for this course, for the self-study, I've given you 3 EKGs, and for the in-class portion, you have, I think, about 9 or 10 of them. And a normal EKG, up here at the top, you're going to see a whole bunch of information that calculates the rate, the rhythm, the axis, all of that for you. But where's the fun in that? We're going to do it ourselves instead of letting the computer do it. So let's begin. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the rate. And what the rate means is how fast is the heart beating. And if you'll remember the picture that we had for an EKG, we had a bunch of waveforms like this, and each one of those represents a beat. So you can see here, this is one heartbeat, that's another one, that's another one, that's another one. So each one of those represents a beat, and you want to know how fast is the heart going. So there are 2 ways to measure the rate, and now you can say the first way is to know that the EKG from one side to the other side is about 10 seconds long, and so then you just count how many beats there are in 10 seconds, and since there's 60 seconds in a minute, we multiply that times 6. So here we have 14, right? So 14 times 6 is 84 beats per minute. And so that's one way to do it, but there's another way that I'm going to show you. And that is to just look at 2 neighboring beats. And you can see here that here's one beat and here's another beat, and how many boxes are in between it. Each one of these boxes represents 200 milliseconds, and if you zoom in close, you see that there are 5 tiny boxes within there. Each one is about a millimeter in size, and those represent 40 milliseconds. So we got 1 big box, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then maybe 3 small boxes. So we have 200 times 5 equals 1,000 milliseconds, but then we had, I think we said 3 more of those 40 millisecond boxes, so 20, we'll say, something like that. So a little over a second, but this is too much math. Let's not do it this way, right? Let's just do it the much easier way. And the way that we do it is shown here with these numbers, 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, 50, 42. Now you can either memorize these numbers, which is what I do, or you could say that it's the number of boxes divided by 300. So 300 divided by 1 is 300, 300 divided by 2 is 150, by 3 is 300, by 4 is 75, etc. And so if you do that, then you can just kind of count off 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, 50. Okay, so it's probably somewhere in this one between 60 and 50, and it looks like it's closer to 50, so maybe I'd say it's 54 beats per minute. Let's go to that initial EKG we looked at. Okay, here, so let's just zoom in real close here, and let's do the same thing. So let's find one that kind of falls on one of those lines. I'm sorry if I'm giving you vertigo here. Here we go. This one does. Right here. Okay, and I'm going to use a red color. So we go 300, 150, 175. So we know that we are somewhere between 100 and 75. And maybe it's closer to the 75, so I might say it's 85, I'm guessing. And that's kind of close to what we got over here, right? We said 84 and we came up with 85. So that's one way to determine the rate. Now remember, a normal rate is going to be between 60 and 100. Some people might say 50 and 100. If you are more than 100, you're too fast. And if you're less than 100, if you're less than 60, you're too slow. And we have terms for this. So too slow is called bradycardia. Brady meaning slow, cardia meaning heart. And then too fast is called tachycardia. Tachy means fast, like a tachometer. And so too fast heart. Okay, so anything in 60 and 100 is normal. Too slow is less than that. It's bradycardia. Too fast is tachycardia. Okay? In the next video, we're going to take a look at rhythm. But before you watch the next video, why don't you go to the 3 EKGs that I gave you and see if you can calculate the rate.